Hello, everyone. Hello. My name is Aaron Bieber, no relation to the horrible pop star. I work at Wayfair. You can find me at email aaron@aaronbieber.com, Twitter @aaronbieber, and my website, aaronbieber.com. My presentation tonight is called Evil Mode, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Emacs. I love Vim. It's funny that Chris started his presentation with the same 3 words. We're all here sort of for the same reason. As some justification for my love, did I leave that in there? I started using Vim around 98 or so. I had the same experience as maybe many of you did. I had a friend, he was using Vim, I saw him using Vim. It was like force of will just caused things to move everywhere, and I got him to get me set up, went through Vim Tutor like 55 times, and from then on I was completely hooked up till now. I've configured Vim a lot. You can find my Vim configuration on GitHub. It's easily about 1,000 lines of handwritten code, and I've probably rewritten it so many times. Not that lines of code is a great measure of anything, but I've spent a lot of time configuring Vim. I wrote a plugin for Vim called QuickTask, a lightweight task management plugin. I've had pull requests on GitHub. It's semi-popular. I'm kind of proud of it. I spent a long time on it. I've taught Vim at Wayfair at work. A colleague of mine and I both loved Vim a whole lot, and we started teaching classes. We developed a whole curriculum, multiple tiers, beginner, intermediate, master, all this stuff. It was an interactive class. Actually got a few people to switch to Vim or to reignite their love of Vim, and it was really satisfying to see people sort of catch on to it the way that we did. I own Vim clothing. I own pieces of clothing with Vim logos and like references on it that I wear in public that I purchased for actual American currency. If that's not sort of a show of love, I don't know what is. And I honestly believe that Vim is the greatest text editor that has ever been created. It even rivals a lot of IDEs out there, with few exceptions. And now I use Emacs. Why? So what happened, right? From 98 till now, probably millions of hours of Vim configuration behind me. How did I get here? So there are three major reasons why I decided to take this path and how I wound up where I am today in front of you guys and the entire world and the internet talking about this. Number 1, Evil Mode. Raise your hand if you've heard of Evil Mode. Raise your hand if you've tried Evil Mode. Like 3 people, okay. So Evil actually is an acronym. It stands for Extensible Vi Layer. Perhaps that's contrived, but it portends to be a Vim emulator basically within Emacs. As a side note, we all probably use Vim emulators. Who here uses Pentadactyl, Vimium, or CVim? A third or so. Okay. Who uses the Vim keys in Gmail or GitHub, Vimode in Bash or ZSH? Yeah. All Vim emulators. I'm pretty pleased with a lot of them. You guys are semi-pleased with some of them. For sure. Okay. Vim emulation. Awesome. Number 2, org mode. Who's heard of org mode? Few of us. Interesting. Cool. It's a note-taking and task list management software package, let's call it. Basically, this mode thing, for those of you not as familiar with the Emacs world, a mode is just a collection of behavior for Emacs. Typically, when you're using Emacs, you have a major mode, which is very close to what Vim would consider to be a file type. And then you can have any number of minor modes, which for the most part behave as though you've loaded a plugin. with the difference being that minor modes can be contextually aware, like I am in a file of this type, therefore I would also like these minor modes. So it's a little bit more flexible than simply having a plugin loaded, if only because unloading Vim plugins is such a pain that Tim Pope wrote a plugin for it. So anyway, org mode, it's a task management plugin. That's kind of what it looks like. It was written by this German astronomer named Carsten Dominic. He did a talk at Google in 2008, which is incredible and is worth watching just for the spectacle of how amazing org mode is as a software package on its own, even if you never use it. Google Talks are well produced, and it's a really interesting thing. So I saw this talk on YouTube, and I was in the midst of trying to do a release of QuickTask to solve all these problems with like moving task items around and stuff, and like basically trying to bring like semantic meaning to a whole bunch of different levels of indentation, which is like really hard to do. And I saw this, and I was like, well, that guy solved it already. So maybe I should try that at some point and see how that informs my process. So that sort of, it perked me up, and I became interested. Wayfair. I work at Wayfair. Who's heard of Wayfair? Almost everybody, which is awesome. Our aided awareness is up to about 60% now, so that's great. We're one of the world's largest online destinations for home goods. Basically, anything that you can find in your house, we probably sell. And it's a pretty cool engineering shop, a cool place to work. We have a pretty big team, about 400 engineers. And our system, our platform, is currently written in PHP, and keep your comments to yourselves. It was classic ASP, so this is a giant step in the right direction. Our system is over 20,000 PHP files. It's a very large code base. Like, I've never worked on a code base of this size. And because of the size of the code base, and because of the legacy nature of the code base, a lot of it having been translated by rote from classic ASP, we have files that could be 10,000 lines long. Not a best practice, but it's a pattern. We're working on it. And I need to edit these files sometimes. So these are things that I face in my day-to-day, challenges that I have. When you deal with a large code base, a very large code base of 10+ thousand files, and files that are 5+ thousand lines, who here uses C tags? Good. If you don't, look into it. In addition to C tags, so I started using a different package called GNU Global. It's basically the same idea, except it uses a Berkeley database in the back end instead of a text file, which is really helpful when you have 20,000 PHP files you need to parse. You run into some problems, like you want to actually generate C tags for your 20,000 PHP files. You want to do linting and code style checks on a 6,000 or 7,000 line file basically constantly while you're editing it. You want to be able to do auto-completion. You want to be able to do some dynamic real-time stuff, and you've got a lot of data to sift through. And these were things that I had some challenges making Vim really behave the way I wanted it to. You've got uCompleteMe, neocomple cache, auto-comp-by-pop. Some of these require C compilation, to actually make it performant. And all of these things felt like hacks, sort of like, we asked Bram for it, and Bram didn't feel that we were worth it. So we had to write our own thing, whatever. So those are some of the challenges that I was facing in my life, and started to think about this a little bit more. That's wayfair.com. Neovim. So we've now already heard this mentioned a few times in the previous talk, just in passing. Who's heard of Neovim? Almost everybody. It's really gaining traction. It's self-described as an ambitious fork of Vim. I'm not sure if it's necessarily ambitious by definition. They've retained most of the code base, in fact. But it introduces Lua scripting for extensibility, asynchronous processing, decoupling the UI from the core. It's sort of like the promise of being able to use the Vim engine with other things. Something that apparently a lot of people want. The project itself has gathered a lot of support. There have been over 3,500 commits in the last 18 months by over 100 contributors that are listed on GitHub. There may actually be more. But it wasn't stable. It's pretty stable now, I hear, and I haven't personally tried it, but it was not stable when I was going through all of this like Wayfair stuff and trying to figure out how to solve these problems. It just wasn't really a viable option. And another thing that Neovim kind of speaks to, or perhaps illustrates, is Vim as a software project, right? So Vim has Python and Ruby bindings. Those are incredibly useful to avoid writing VimL, and maybe you guys have used Powerline, and then you saw how Powerline got ported to Python, and then everybody was like, ugh. Now I have to get these Python bindings to work, and I use 3 different machines. I use Linux at work, I use a Mac at home, sometimes I have to use a PC. Try getting the Python bindings to work on a PC, by the way, if you ever want to find out what real pain is. So you need to have the correct versions of all of the libraries, and everything needs to be compiled perfectly, and it's actually very picky. And I'm just a curious and fearless person when it comes to trying new things, so I was kind of open to the idea of like maybe Neovim, maybe Emacs, maybe Atom, maybe something else. So I decided to try Emacs because of the first 2 things. So I thought it seemed like the most viable option. And that was a year ago. So it's been some time. So what have I learned from all of this? Well, that's why you guys are here, hopefully. So maybe you've heard this. Emacs is a great operating system, lacking only a decent editor. So it's fair to say that Emacs is certainly more than just a text editor. Emacs is a very mature and capable software package. It was maybe first conceived of in the late 70s. That was the first time that a piece of software was written that was called Emacs. But then Emacs just stood for like macro system. It was written for the PDP-10 by Richard Stallman at MIT, for a system where literally moving a cursor around on a screen was not something that ever happened. In fact, you just typed text, and if you made a mistake, you started over again. So that sort of evolved into the Emacs that we know now, which maybe the closest form to that was GNU Emacs, 1984 or so. So right about when the first Macintosh came out, the first Emacs as we know it as a window where you can move your cursor kind of existed. So it predates Vim by a few years, but not too long, 6 or 7 years. Anything that I've ever wanted to implement or that I've wanted to change, similar to Vim, great community. I've always found an answer somewhere. Stack Overflow, very active, Emacs Wiki, all kinds of web pages. Evil mode is essentially Vim within Emacs. As complete of an implementation as could exist, evil mode probably is it. Emacs can do anything that Vim can do, basically. All the surround stuff, all the relative number stuff, it's basically all possible. Everything within Emacs as a software package is exposed through an API of Lisp functions, so you can just plug into those and basically change anything about it. And a few smart people set about creating evil mode, and they basically re-implemented everything in Vim, which must have been a lot of work, but it's certainly possible. And it can do many things that Vim cannot do. So this is kind of the part where I was trying to solve these problems. And some of the things that it can do, asynchronous processing, Neovim can also do that. Stuff like terminal emulation, Neovim can now also do that. Neovim is chasing Emacs, essentially. Decoupled server and client. You can actually run Emacs as a daemon. And this is not like Vim's like client server where one instance of Vim acts like a client and the other acts like a server. Emacs is 12 megabytes, core with none of the Lisp extensions. The Emacs client is 29K. It's a lightweight client. It basically just displays what the server tells it to. I don't know if that's of value to anybody here, but we'll talk about that later. Emacs is different from Vim in the sense that Emacs actually has a different GUI implementation than a terminal implementation. Emacs's GUI implementation can actually support different font sizes, graphics, line drawing, SVG, displaying PDFs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If those are of any value to you, I also don't know, but it's true. GVim, which I used for probably 7 solid years at the job that I had before Wayfair, is basically terminal Vim with like a toolbar on it. And that's nice for the millions of colors, but it doesn't really give you anything more than that. Emacs has that. And before you wonder if graphics are really useful, does anybody here use Powerline? One person, okay. Probably not as many people as I expected for the reason that I had trouble using it, which is like all this patched font madness. Total madness. Like the lengths that people go to get some of that gooey goodness into the terminal is insanity. It's insanity. Does anybody use Nerdtree? No, a couple of people. That's probably good because like something like vinegar is like a lot more efficient. But again, Nerdtree, use little Unicode arrows for the different like tree leaves. People want that stuff, you know. Sublime Text has that little like mini map thing, and everybody's like, ooh, mini map. You guys are over that. Very good. Okay. Objectively, Emacs is better software. Bear with me now. Give me the benefit of the doubt. Okay. So better is a relative term. But as a recap, and to add a little bit more detail, Neovim. Simply the existence of an ambitious fork where a group of 100 or more talented software developers decided that they couldn't get something from a package to such a degree that they forked it and have gone off the beaten path to go create this like new thing. That's an indication of something. It's an indication of some discontent. It's an indication of something lacking, one or more things. And I think Neovim is a slightly naive project. It's still in its infancy. I think Lua is a weird choice, yada, yada. But its existence indicates something. The health of the Vim project, and this is something that I mentioned in my blog, so maybe you guys have already seen it, but Bram Moulinar gave an interview to Alexis Santos back in 2014, and Alexis asked, how can the community ensure that the Vim project succeeds for the foreseeable future? Which is kind of a deep question. And Bram Moulinar is the original author and still primary maintainer of the project. He's sort of like the Linus Torvalds of Vim, right? And his answer was, keep me alive, smiley face. So this is a software project owner of one of the two most like crazy popular, incredible text editors, and his plan for the project is to live forever. That's irresponsible, simply put. Nobody lives forever. What's going to happen when Bram dies? I don't know. I will also mention Richard Stallman handed over project leadership to two guys named Stefan Manier and Chong Yidong in 2008. I'm not sure if Chong is still a primary contributor, but Stefan still is. There are maybe 3 admins that actually manage the source code of Emacs, and Richard is still one of them, but he stepped down. He was like, that's fine, these guys are great, they can do it, I need to go do talks, so it's cool. There's a chain of command, basically. All right, so it's all about the right tool for the job. Emacs isn't right for everyone, okay? All these things that people have said about Emacs having a big footprint and being memory intensive and blah, 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 it's all true. If you're remoting into systems all the time and like editing Puppet files and all of that, you want to use Vim. Vim is there, it's fast, it's good. Now, you can also use Tramp. Okay, it's true, yeah. I know. So that's a viable option too. But just in the general sense, Vim has its purposes in how it's lightweight and ubiquitous. And you don't expect Emacs to be installed on all remote systems that you remote into. And if you remote into systems often, they'll be there. And if you have like private key stuff, that's another story. Vim isn't right for everyone either. This is clearly true. I've tried to convince like 500 people to use it, and maybe 7 now do, right? Java developers, good luck. Vim is historically difficult to work with Java just because Java IDEs are so amazingly powerful and intelligent. So you can use the whole Eclipse like server thing, and it's very difficult to set up, and maybe that will pay off for you. Data scientists, people who spend their days in Mathematica or R, they write as much code as we do, but you're not going to convince them to copy and paste everything that they write all the time. Emacs is right for me. So ultimately, this is an opinion piece. And I found this spot where evil mode and the Vim interface intersects with Emacs and allows me to use the strengths of Emacs and the strengths of Vim at the same time. And I'm going to try to demonstrate that. Let me show you. There it is. brace yourselves. Brace yourselves. I'm going to try to change my display settings on the fly. All right. And mirror. Okay. All right. This is Emacs. This is actually the homebrew version of Emacs. Brew install Emacs. And actually, this is brew install Emacs git head, but same thing. Okay. Yeah. Right? And I also use this in Ubuntu at work, and my configuration works seamlessly across both systems, which is great. So I'm leading in here with a little bit of org mode. So this is org mode itself. I'll just click through this a little bit. So this is org mode. You can have, these basically to-do items. You can indent and dedent them like this. You can have any arbitrary text you want, and sections collapse and expand and blah, 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 which is very cool. You can have lists, which is nice. And then it blew my mind when I found out that it actually understands how to change list types. So it can just change list types on the fly like this. And of course, you can move things. It knows that you can't move things past the bottom, too. Basically, already solved all the problems that QuickTask took me like a year to figure out how to do. It already does it. And then there was this. Then there was this thing. Well, what if you wanted to just I want to say a student, and then first, and then a class name or something, and then I guess you can just make a table. But what I forgot was actually let's just do that. Yeah, it does tables. And then the tables also have spreadsheet capabilities. They can actually do mathematical operations in columns, and there's all these keys you have to press to do it, but you can remap all of those. But anyway, it's I watched that video in 2008, and the guy who wrote it, he opens up this thing, and he's like, oh, by the way, it makes tables. I was like, what? And then you just can keep typing, and as soon as you tab out, it just resizes the table for you. It's weird. Okay. So I want this talk to be more about how Emacs is similar to Vim than the other way around, right? So notice that I'm running Powerline. This might be hard to see for you guys in back. Let me actually do this. So I don't know if you guys use Powerline in Vim, but this is sort of like the Emacs version of Powerline, which is also called Powerline. It's kind of nice. You can see, which Vim mode you're in, so it sort of does all that stuff, visual, all that stuff works. But the kind of interesting thing about this implementation, first you have that little block over on the right that looks like it's broken. That's actually my position in this file. Isn't that interesting? And that's actually achieved by creating an XPM graphic on the fly computationally in Lisp and then placing it onto the screen, which is also where the triangles come from. No patched fonts. This is out of the box. It looks really bad in the terminal, like they try to use a patched font thing, and it's not good in the terminal. But if you're just using the GUI, that's out of the box like no work. And the other cool thing about it is you can change it. You can have different shapes, because they're just little XPMs. It might be hard to tell on the projector and from that distance that they're different. So that's kind of the power. The other thing that I wanted to mention, so this is actually an eLisp function that I wrote. To call a function, you place it in parentheses. I'm not going to teach you eLisp. But one of the cool things about Emacs and the way it is extended in general is that eLisp is self-documenting. So rather than having a script of VimL that you have to go read to figure out how it works and what it does, you can actually ask Emacs what this function does. And you do it like this. Ask it to describe this function. And it says, yes, cycle powerline separators is an interactive Lisp function in my global function file. And it's bound to PL. Comma is my leader key. I'm using a Vim plugin, Emacs plugin that emulates the leader functionality. And it actually tells you, it also accepts this reverse thing that makes it go backwards. So if I were to give it a reverse, it would go backwards through the settings. The self-documenting features of Emacs makes it actually really easy to learn all of these things once you sort of figure out how to get into that documentation. Okay. So that's that. I've done org mode. I've done powerline. Let's work on a little project. So I have a project. This is a PHP project. I'm going to put this in web mode for you. All right. So first, web mode. Web mode is one of several modes that support multiple modes at the same time, and what that essentially means is it does what Vim has struggled to do for so long, which is support templates. And this is not really a huge problem for better designed software projects where you have proper templates and separation of all this stuff, but occasionally we have to edit files where it's HTML and CSS and JavaScript and PHP, and they're all mixed together. And what you'll notice is that the CSS is correctly syntax highlighted, but that's not because there's like nested regexes that recognize CSS within some outer HTML. It actually knows that this is CSS. I'm not sure if this is going to work either. I guess it's not. But I've had some success with this, and it's kind of a cool thing, this thing called web mode, and it lets you do stuff like, oh, I want the insides of all style tags to be indented by 2 spaces, and it just kind of automatically can do that. All right. So what does this project do? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you in a fun way. I'm going to run a terminal emulator that actually runs ZSH inside of Emacs, and then I'm just going to run PHP as a server. We'll run it on 8080. And now that's running in the background, and now I can switch over into Chrome. It's an application that computes how many days you've been alive. It's cool. So I'll just put in my birth date here. I'm going to date myself for real. All right. So I'm about 12,000 days old. But that's kind of funky. I don't like all those decimal places and stuff. So I think we should fix that. So let's fix that. So first of all, yes, I can run a terminal emulator inside of Vim, inside of Emacs. You can run a terminal emulator inside of Neovim, at least recently. I just saw a post about this. This is an actual terminal emulator. This is running my configuration of ZSH, like my whole prompt and everything. It's a little bit wonky on colors, but it totally works. So I'm actually running a PHP server in a terminal emulator in Emacs. I haven't even opened iTerm yet. You can achieve this with tmux, but there's some interesting things about this, which is now I have Vim keys. So like if I wanted to, just select this whole column, I can do that. It's within my editor. Everything's in the editor now. Bringing more things into the editor. That's sort of the Emacs approach is like put everything in Emacs. The kitchen sink goes in Emacs, all of it. All right, so I want to fix this little bug. We're going to number format that and put a ceiling on it. And in order to do that, well, I probably should create a feature branch, right? Because we're good developers. So I'm going to use an Emacs package called Magit, which is the Emacs interface to Git. It literally blows Tim Pope's plugin out of the water. It literally destroys it. So this is the basic interface. This is the status, which there isn't much because it's up to date. I'm just going to create a new branch. Oh, look, I can set up stream. I can do all these things. These are all interactive commands. I'm just going to create a new one. I'm going to call it fix numbers. And I'm going to create it against master. OK, it's all good. We'll just leave that like that. So it looks like if I look down in here, there's like this form, and the form posts to this thing, and it looks like we just use this process post command. That seems to process the data. So let's jump to that definition. Ooh, I can't jump to it because I don't have a tags file. It says gtags not found. I haven't generated tags for this project yet. So I'm going to generate tags right now. But first I'm going to tell you that I copied the entire Laravel source into this project so that it would take a really long time because this project is 1 file or 2 files. So I'm just going to go ahead and generate tags. And while I'm doing that, I can just, maybe I'll just like edit some style sheets or something. Because all this stuff kind of happens asynchronously in the background. It's no problem. You just like add a comment here. Oh, that's the wrong comment type. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, that's good. That's done. OK, cool. There we go. Process post. So that solves one of my problems. All right, so process post does all this stuff, and basically we take this day between. What we want to do is let's just actually let's do like a floor around this, and then let's Let's number format that. Okay, that'll probably work. Let's see if that worked. Cool. Okay, number formatted, rounded. That's nice. Okay, time to commit. Let's save that file. I've got some changes. Cool. So I have these unstaged changes. I don't remember. What did I change? Oh, yeah. I changed that line. Okay, that's cool. And this will actually let me chunk the commits, too. You can just stage these bits interactively if you want to. But this is just one change, so we'll just go with that. And index, it looks like I just added this thing. I don't want that, so let's just kill that hunk. Discard hunk. Done. All right, stage that. And let's commit. Fix number format. Done. There's my log. What did that look like? There's the diff of the whole log. And there's like long log format. You can do a lot. It's all interactive. All you need to do is rebind some of these keys to not be insane, which is really not hard to do. Cool. So we've done that. How are we doing on time? I'm doing pretty good. Okay. So another thing, snippets, right? Documentation, snippets, all this kind of stuff. Kind of cool stuff. We all like it. And PHP is really important because the arguments are always like in a weird order and you don't remember what they are. So if I wanted to like check if an array key exists, it's prompting me. Oh, there we go. That's awesome. So there's actually an eLisp function in this PHP extras package that goes and sucks down all the PHP documentation and then it like loads it. It takes a key in an array, so then we can just do like key and then my array or whatever it is. And then of course we have snippets as well. Boop. And those are all defined in snippets files. It's the same as the package is called ya snippet, but it's basically the same as like ultisnips, except it's implemented in Lisp. Cool. So I think that's essentially it. What I'm going to also demonstrate real quick, so that's my presentation running in here, but I can also, let me see if this will work out of the box. Okay. The colors are nasty, but that's iTerm connected as a client to this graphical Emacs running here. And if I'll just open this same file in this buffer, and what you'll see is I can do stuff like this. Now, this is completely useless, right? But you can run this daemon in the background, and then basically the way it works is like you use Emacs client as your $editor, and wherever you are, there you are. And you have all your buffers. All your buffers are there. Everything's there. It's like your state is saved. All right. And then a little bit of foolishness, just to wrap it up. If I'm still connected to the internet, which is going to be the killer. Let me just restart Emacs real quick. There we go. Cool. Just make that text bigger. There we go. Yeah, what's that? Oh, that's Twitter. But even cooler, give it a second to actually curl stuff. Yeah, you got graphics. You got gravatars. It's possible. I'm going to see a tweet in a second from Chris Toomey. Damn that Bieber. There he is. It'll get your gravatar in a second. Maybe. There you are. There he is. Very cool. I love it. All right. So, I'm going to skip to the end now. I didn't really figure out how to finish this with the mirroring situation. Questions? In the back.
So you spent a lot of years getting up to speed with Vim to
pretty high level, and then transitioned to Emacs. So how long did it take you to get to a place where you felt comfortable, efficient, and weren't really missing Vim? 15 days. I'm working on a blog post called Vim to Emacs in 14 days. I think if you followed a guide, it could be 5. I think if you started with Spacemacs, which is a distribution of Emacs that emulates Vim, it could be 0 or 2. The problem that I have with Spacemacs is the problem that I have with copying Tim Pope's Vim config. I wouldn't do it. I like to start from scratch, but I'm an ambitious person, and I spent a weekend figuring out this new muscle memory you need for Control-G, which is the way you like cancel things in Emacs, and it's like the one thing that you really need to know. So you need to learn a little bit of new stuff around the edges, but as soon as you get Evil Mode installed and running, it is Vim. So for all intents and purposes, you're just kind of learning new things on top of that. You're productive, at least. There's also, I didn't even mention, I used a lot of these narrowing list prompts, which is a package called Helm. It's a narrowing completion framework, but the cool thing about it is it's like Control-P for every single list in Emacs ever. It just is automatically applied to any time you pick anything. Choose a color theme, search for a function name, whatever. It becomes a fuzzy finding narrowing list automatically. And a lot of the packages in Emacs are like that because of the way that eLisp as a language is structured. You have the ability to do something called advice, which is for any given Lisp function, run my function around it or before it or after it. And so by doing that, it's basically like the idea of like a mix-in. Like I have a package and actually it doesn't perform exactly the way I want it to, so you can just create some advice around its stuff, and then you don't need to backport or patch anything in the future.
Hypothetically, if you came to Emacs before doing anything with Vim and then discovered Evil Mode, do you think that you would still use Evil Mode or no?
The question is, if I had used Emacs originally and then discovered Evil Mode, would I choose Evil Mode? I personally, I think I would. Learning Vim was revelatory for me, and it was initially as challenging as learning how to type in a lot of ways. And learning how to type is one of the most gratifying things I ever did in my entire life. Learning Vim is probably the second most gratifying thing that I have done in my entire life. And that, keep that to yourself back there. Priorities, man. I think so. And what's interesting too is that there's a very large Evil Mode community, and there's a very large like Vim expat community, I guess you could call us. And I sort of count myself among their number, I suppose, sheepishly. But there's also still a huge community of people who love Emacs in its pure form with all the crazy key chords. And I didn't even touch on any of the like insanity that the actual Emacs interface is so completely nonsensical that you just have to wonder what sort of human thought that Control-V should be page down and Alt-V should be page up. Well, clearly V makes a lot of sense because it means page, right? You know, so set all that stuff aside and just install Evil Mode, really. Anything else? Questions? Comments? In the back.
8 points downward, that's one.
Yeah. So then when you use Alt, it points upward, just the way that normally V's turn upside down when you hold Alt, right? Yeah.
Do you miss anything, and is this a forever change? Do you ever see yourself coming back?
Do I miss anything, and is this a forever change? No, yes. I think. But again, I think that the way that Emacs solves the problems that I have solves my particular problems in a certain way, and it might not be perfect for everyone, and I think you have to find your own path. And I still use Vim quite often when I remote into machines and I just want to make a quick edit because Vim is still the fastest way to do anything. And yeah, Emacs takes a few seconds to load, and on modern computers it's not really a big deal, but it's a thing. It might bother you. Anything else? Last chance? Rude gestures? Heckling? All right, that's it.